Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Have you ever witnessed an injustice so profound that it changed everything you thought you knew? This is a story about a father's awakening, a little girl's courage, and a truth hidden in plain sight. If this touches your heart, please hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. Now let's dive into Zoe's world. Before this story begins, subscribe to the channel and type HOPE in the comments. A beautiful piece of good news may come your way very soon. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed twice, marking 2 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. Richard Callahan's black Mercedes pulled into the circular driveway of their Victorian home in Portland's West Hills, 3 hours earlier than usual. At 43, Richard had built Callahan Technologies into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, but success had come at a price. Endless meetings and late nights had become routine. Today was different. The quarterly board meeting had been canceled, giving Richard an unexpected afternoon off. As he stepped from his car, autumn leaves crunched beneath his Italian leather shoes. Inside, the house felt unusually still. Richard set his briefcase in the foyer, the sound echoing through the high-ceilinged entrance. The interior decorator Vanessa had hired transformed their home into something resembling a luxury hotel. Marble surfaces, abstract art, uncomfortable modern furniture. "Vanessa?" He called up the curved staircase. No response. Richard had met Vanessa 2 years after his first wife Caroline passed from cancer. Zoe had been only 4 then, and Richard was drowning in grief while managing a growing company and a traumatized child. Vanessa seemed like a lifeline, beautiful, sophisticated, seemingly patient with Zoe's special needs. They'd married after 6 months. Zoe. Richard checked his watch. She should be home from her specialized academy by now, dismissed at 1:30 p.m. He moved toward the kitchen, and that's when he heard it, metallic clanging, rhythmic and deliberate. Then something that froze his blood, a child's muffled sobbing. Richard's pace quickened. The clanging grew louder, more insistent. He rounded the corner and stopped dead. Through the doorway, he saw Vanessa in her tennis outfit, holding 2 stainless steel pots, banging them together with deliberate force. Her face bore a twisted smile that looked gleeful, but beyond her shattered something inside Richard's chest. Little Zoe sat on the kitchen floor, her small body curled tight. Her hands pressed desperately against her ears, blonde hair hiding her face. Her frame shook with sobs, tears streaming down flushed cheeks. "Please." Zoe's voice broke between metal crashes. "Please, Vanessa, it hurts so much." Vanessa brought the pots together again with resounding force. "What's that, dear? I can't hear you." "These pots are so loud, aren't they? Maybe you should go to your room." Richard felt punched in the gut. Zoe's hyperacusia had been diagnosed at 5. The audiologist explained her auditory system processed sounds at amplified levels. Normal conversation sounded like shouting. A door closing sounded like gunshots. The condition wasn't deafness but cruel hypersensitivity, turning the world into overwhelming noise. The household had been restructured around Zoe's condition. Soft close cabinets installed throughout. Carpet runners on hard floors. The doorbell replaced with gentle lights. Richard spared no expense ensuring his daughter's comfort. Vanessa knew. She absolutely knew what she was doing. "Stop." Richard's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. Vanessa spun around, pots slipping and clattering to the floor with a crash that made Zoe curl tighter. Vanessa's cruel smile vanished, replaced by wide-eyed surprise. "Richard, you're home early." I can see exactly what you were doing." Richard's voice was dangerously quiet as he moved past Vanessa and knelt beside Zoe. "Sweetheart, it's Daddy. I'm here now." Zoe's tear-stained face emerged. When she saw her father, fresh sobs broke through. She launched into his arms, burying her face against his shoulder. Richard felt her trembling, felt her small heart hammering. "It hurts, Daddy," she whimpered. "Everything's so loud. Make it stop hurting." Richard gathered his daughter and stood, cradling her against his chest. She felt so small, so fragile. Guilt crashed over him. How long had this been happening? He turned to face Vanessa, who'd stepped back, recovering her composure. Richard, this isn't what it looks like. Zoe was being difficult, refusing homework, and I was simply what? Richard's voice could freeze water. Simply torturing a 7-year-old child with a medical condition? That's not fair. You have no idea how challenging she is. Get out. Vanessa blinked. What? Get out of this kitchen. Go upstairs to the guest room. Do not come near Zoe. We will discuss this later. Each word was measured, controlled, but beneath the surface, Richard felt unprecedented rage. Vanessa looked as if she might argue. Then something in Richard's expression convinced her otherwise. She turned and stalked out, tennis shoes squeaking on marble. Richard carried Zoe to her bedroom, a sanctuary designed for her needs. Acoustic panels disguised as decorative clouds lined the walls. Thick carpeting covered the floor. Heavy curtains blocked light and sound. Her bed was piled with soft blankets. He settled into the oversized armchair, keeping Zoe in his lap. She'd stopped crying but still trembled, hands loosely covering her ears. "Daddy?" Her voice barely whispered. "Are you mad at me?" The question felt like a knife. "Mad at you?" "Sweetheart, no. I could never be mad at you for this." Vanessa said I was being difficult. She said I need to learn the world won't always be quiet for me. Richard's jaw clenched. Vanessa was wrong. What she did was cruel and inexcusable. Zoe was quiet, then smaller. Is she going to live here forever? Richard wasn't prepared to answer. Not until he understood the full scope of what had been happening while he'd been too busy building his empire. "Let's not worry about that now," he said gently, stroking her hair. "Right now, your ears need quiet." Zoe nodded against his chest. Richard continued holding her, feeling her breathing gradually slow. Within 15 minutes, she'd fallen into fitful sleep, occasionally whimpering. Richard sat in that chair for another hour, mind racing. He thought about the past 18 months since marrying Vanessa. He'd been certain he was doing right, giving Zoe a mother figure. But now, reviewing memories through this new lens, details stood out. Zoe had become quieter over the past year, more withdrawn. She'd stopped asking friends over. Her teacher mentioned Zoe seemed anxious, though her academic performance remained exceptional. The girl had a brilliant mind, solving math problems meant for children twice her age. Richard had attributed these changes to normal development. Now he wondered what else he'd been blind to. When certain Zoe was deeply asleep, Richard carefully transferred her to bed, tucking covers around her. He activated the white noise machine, special frequencies designed to soothe her condition. Then he dimmed lights to nearly nothing and quietly left. Door cracked open. The walk to the guest room felt like a march to execution. Richard's anger had crystallized into something cold and hard. He knocked once, then entered without waiting. Vanessa stood by the window, having changed into an elegant dress. She touched up makeup and styled her hair. A calculated move, Richard realized, presenting herself at her most attractive. "Richard, darling, we need to talk rationally," she began smoothly. "I know how it looked, but—" "How long?" Richard interrupted. "I'm sorry? How long have you been tormenting my daughter?" Vanessa's expression flickered. Just for a moment, Richard saw something cold and calculating before the mask of concern returned. "I haven't been tormenting anyone. Zoe is sensitive with special needs, yes, but she's also learned to use those needs to manipulate people. She's 7 years old. She's a very intelligent 7-year-old. Vanessa moved closer, perfume filling the space. "Richard, you're not here during the day. You don't see how she plays up her condition to avoid responsibilities." Richard thought of Zoe's trembling body, her genuine terror. What I saw wasn't a child avoiding responsibility. That was abuse. Vanessa's eyes hardened. "Be very careful with that word. I am your wife. I have done nothing but try to help raise your daughter despite her difficulties. By deliberately causing her pain? By trying to teach her resilience? The world isn't going to accommodate her forever. She needs to learn coping strategies. She has coping strategies. Medical treatment, therapy, accommodations. What she doesn't need is someone using her disability as a weapon." Vanessa's composure began cracking. You have no idea what it's like being here day after day with her. The constant walking on eggshells, endless special treatments, everything revolving around poor little Zoe's sensitive ears. There it was, truth slipping through the carefully constructed facade. Richard felt his last doubts dissolve. "Pack your things," he said quietly. Vanessa's eyes widened. "Excuse me?" "Pack your things. I want you out of this house tonight." "You're not serious, Richard. You can't just— We're married." "Yes, we are. And my attorney will be filing divorce papers Monday morning. But I will not have you under the same roof as my daughter one more night." Vanessa's expression shifted through shock, anger, and finally calculation. "If you do this, I'll fight you. I'll take you for everything. Oregon is a no-fault divorce state. I'm entitled to half of everything acquired during our marriage." "Take it," Richard said simply. "Take whatever money you want, but you will never be near Zoe again." For a long moment they stared at each other. Then Vanessa laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're actually choosing her over me, over us." "There is no choice to make." There never was. Something ugly twisted across Vanessa's beautiful face. "You'll regret this. That little brat has you wrapped around her finger. Don't." The single word came with such force that Vanessa stepped back. "Don't you dare." Vanessa's mouth snapped shut. She stood another moment, then spun toward the closet and began yanking out suitcases. Richard left her to packing and returned to Zoe's room. His daughter still slept, expression more peaceful now. He settled back into the armchair, pulling out his phone. The first call went to his attorney, Marcus Patterson. Marcus answered on the third ring. "Richard, everything all right? I need to file for divorce immediately. I need Vanessa removed from all accounts, all access to Zoe. And I need it done fast." There was a pause. "What happened?" Richard explained, keeping his voice low. He heard Marcus's sharp intake of breath. "Jesus, Richard, I'm sorry. Yes, I can start paperwork tonight. Given what you've described, we can pursue a restraining order if needed. Do whatever's necessary to protect Zoe." After hanging up, Richard made his second call to Dr. Sarah Chen, Zoe's therapist specializing in auditory processing conditions. "Dr. Chen, it's Richard Callahan. I'm sorry to call after hours, but something's happened." He explained again. Dr. Chen listened without interrupting. "Mr. Callahan, what you're describing is sensory abuse. It's more common than people realize. Children with conditions like Zoe's are vulnerable because the pain they experience is invisible. How do I help her? The fact that you witnessed it and immediately intervened is crucial. Many children aren't believed. She needs to know you believe her, that you'll protect her, and that what happened wasn't her fault. We should schedule an emergency session tomorrow. I'll bring her first thing." Around 7 p.m. he heard Vanessa moving downstairs carrying suitcases. He didn't go down, he couldn't leave Zoe's side. Then the front door slammed, hard enough to rattle windows. Zoe stirred but didn't wake. Vanessa's BMW roared to life and peeled from the driveway. Only then did Richard fully exhale. An hour later, Zoe woke. She looked around confused, then focused on Richard in the chair. "Daddy, you're still here?" "I'm still here, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere." Zoe sat up slowly, pushing blonde hair back. "Is Vanessa gone?" "Yes." "Is she coming back?" Richard moved to sit on her bed edge. "No, Zoe. She's not coming back. Not ever." Zoe's gray eyes, so like her mother's, searched his face. "Because of what she did to me?" "Because of what she did to you, yes. And because I should have seen it sooner. I should have been here. You were at work. You have to work. Not as much as I have been. Things are going to change, okay? I'm going to be home more. Will it just be us now, like before? Just us? Is that okay?" For the first time since Richard came home, Zoe smiled. Small, tentative, but genuine. "That's more than okay, Daddy. That's perfect." Richard pulled his daughter into a gentle hug, feeling something shift in his chest. He'd built an empire, made millions, earned respect. But sitting here in this quiet room with his 7-year-old daughter, he realized he'd nearly lost the only thing that truly mattered. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "We never had dinner." Zoe nodded against his shoulder. How about scrambled eggs? I'll be very quiet with the pans. Zoe pulled back to look at him, and there was something like mischief in her eyes, an expression he hadn't seen in months. You don't have to be too quiet, Daddy. Normal sounds are okay. It's just when people are mean on purpose that it hurts the most. The wisdom in her words struck Richard deeply. She'd learned to distinguish between inevitable sounds of living and deliberate cruelty. No 7-year-old should have developed that awareness. They went downstairs together, Zoe's small hand in his. The kitchen still bore evidence of the afternoon. The pots Vanessa had dropped still lying on the floor. Richard quietly picked them up and put them in the sink while Zoe settled at the table. As he cooked their simple meal, moving carefully to minimize noise, Richard made mental notes of everything needing change. He'd already decided to cut office hours dramatically. Zoe needed stability, presence, protection. They ate their eggs in comfortable silence, and afterward Richard ran Zoe a bath, making sure water pressure was low to avoid harsh sounds. While she bathed, he tidied her room and laid out favorite pajamas. When Zoe was ready for bed, Richard tucked her in again and sat beside her. "Daddy?" Zoe's voice was drowsy. "Thank you for coming home early today." "You're welcome, sweetheart. It was like fate wanted you to see. Like Mom was watching out for me." Richard felt his throat tighten. "Your mom is always watching out for you. I know she is. Do you think she's proud of you for making Vanessa leave?" "I think she's proud of you, Zoe. For being so brave and strong." Zoe yawned. "I'm not that brave. I was really scared today." "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going even when you are scared." Richard kissed her forehead. "Sleep now. Tomorrow is a new day." As Zoe drifted off, Richard remained beside her bed thinking about the road ahead. Divorce proceedings, therapy for Zoe, restructuring his work life. But underneath those practical concerns lay a deeper question. How had he let this happen? The answer, Richard realized, was that he'd been looking at life through the wrong lens. He'd measured success by business metrics, financial growth, peer respect. He'd convinced himself that providing material comfort was the same as being present. His phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Initial divorce papers drafted. We'll file Monday morning." Richard typed back, "Thank you." He looked at his sleeping daughter, at the peaceful expression on her face. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Legal battles, emotional recovery, rebuilding their lives. But for the first time in years, Richard felt certain he was on the right path. The sound of silence in Zoe's room wasn't empty. It was full of possibility, of healing, of a future where she could feel safe in her own home. Morning sunlight filtered through Zoe's specialized curtains. Richard had spent the night in the armchair, dozing fitfully, waking at every small sound. His neck ached and his back protested, but he didn't regret it. After yesterday's revelation, being even a room away from Zoe had been intolerable. Zoe stirred around 7:30, gray eyes blinking open to find her father watching with a soft expression. "Morning, sweetheart," Richard said quietly. "How are your ears today?" Zoe sat up slowly, taking internal inventory. "They're okay. A little sensitive, but okay." "That's good. We have an appointment with Dr. Chen at 10 o'clock. Zoe's expression became guarded. "Because of what happened yesterday. Because I want to make sure you have all the support you need." After helping Zoe get dressed, she chose a soft purple sweater and favorite jeans with tags carefully removed. Richard made them breakfast. He'd dismissed the household staff via text, giving them a paid week off while he sorted things out. He wanted privacy, time alone with Zoe. As they ate oatmeal with honey, Zoe seemed lighter somehow. The tension that had become constant in her small shoulders appeared diminished. "Daddy?" she asked between bites. "What happens now? With Vanessa, I mean." Richard had spent much of his sleepless night considering how to explain adult matters to a 7-year-old. "Well, Vanessa and I are going to get divorced. Do you know what that means?" "It means you won't be married anymore." "That's right. It means she won't be living here, and she won't be part of our family anymore." Zoe absorbed this while stirring her oatmeal. "Will I have to see her, like for visits?" The fear in her voice was palpable. Richard reached across the table to take her small hand. "No, sweetheart. You will never have to see her or talk to her again if you don't want to. I promise you that. What if she wants to see me? It doesn't matter what she wants. What matters is what's best for you. Zoe's shoulders visibly relaxed. Okay, that's good. She paused. Daddy, I need to tell you something. The seriousness in her tone made Richard's attention sharpen. You can tell me anything. Yesterday wasn't the first time. Richard felt his chest constrict. What do you mean? Vanessa being mean on purpose, with sounds. Zoe's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She did it before. Lots of times. The oatmeal in Richard's stomach turned to lead. Tell me, Zoe, tell me everything. Over the next 20 minutes, sitting at their kitchen table, 7-year-old Zoe recounted a catalog of cruelty. Vanessa had been careful, always waiting until they were alone. She'd slam doors passing Zoe's room, drop heavy objects deliberately, vacuum directly outside Zoe's door during afternoon rest when her ears were most sensitive, turn up television to uncomfortable volumes when Richard wasn't home. She said if I told you, you wouldn't believe me, Zoe explained, tears streaming down her face. She said you'd think I was making it up because I didn't like having a new mom. She said you'd be mad at me for causing trouble. Richard came around the table and gathered Zoe into his arms. I believe you. I believe every word. And I am not mad at you. I'm mad at myself for not seeing it, for not being here enough to protect you. You couldn't know, Daddy, you were at work, and I was scared to tell you.
I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I was just being too sensitive. No. Richard pulled back to look Zoe in the eyes. Listen to me carefully, Zoe. You are not too sensitive. Your condition is real. It's medical. And anyone who uses it to hurt you is wrong. What Vanessa did was abuse, and none of it was your fault. Zoe nodded, wiping tears. I tried to be good. I tried to be quiet and stay out of her way, but she'd still find reasons. I know, sweetheart, I know. Richard held her close, mind reeling. How had he missed this? Looking back, there had been signs. Zoe's increasing reluctance to stay home, her requests to go to the office with him more often, her anxiety when he mentioned business trips. They sat together until Zoe's tears subsided. Then Richard helped her wash her face and prepare for their appointment. The drive to Dr. Chen's office was quiet. Zoe sat in her booster seat wearing specialized noise-canceling headphones. Richard watched her in the rearview mirror, heart aching. Dr. Sarah Chen's practice was located in a converted Victorian house in Portland's Pearl District. The waiting room had been specifically designed for children with sensory processing issues. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, sound-dampening panels disguised as colorful artwork. Dr. Chen emerged from her office promptly at 10. She was a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes and a gentle manner. Good morning, Zoe. Richard. She shook Richard's hand and smiled at Zoe. Zoe, I thought we might start with just you and me this morning, if that's okay. Your dad can join us after a bit. Zoe looked to Richard for permission. He nodded encouragingly. I'll be right here if you need me. As Zoe disappeared into Dr. Chen's office, Richard settled into one of the ergonomic chairs and pulled out his phone. A text from Marcus awaited. Divorce papers ready. Need to discuss something else when you have time. Call me. Richard stepped outside to make the call. Marcus, it's Richard. What's going on? The divorce papers are straightforward. But Richard, I did some preliminary checking into Vanessa's background this morning, and there are things you should know. I'm listening. This isn't her first marriage to a wealthy man. She was married twice before, once at 22 to a real estate developer in Seattle, divorced after 18 months. Again at 25 to a venture capitalist in San Francisco, divorced after 2 years. Both times she walked away with substantial settlements. Richard felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're saying I'm a pattern? I'm saying you might want to consider the possibility that this marriage was less about love and more about opportunity from the start. Did either of those men have children? The venture capitalist had a son from his first marriage. I'm trying to track him down, but it's taking time. Keep trying, I want to know everything. After hanging up, Richard stood outside watching traffic pass. Everything he'd believed about his marriage was crumbling. The session with Dr. Chen lasted 45 minutes. When the office door opened,
Zoe emerged, looking emotionally drained but somehow lighter. Dr. Chen gestured for Richard to join them. In her office, surrounded by soft pillows and gentle lighting, Dr. Chen got straight to the point. Zoe has shared with me what's been happening at home. Richard, I want to be clear. What your wife did constitutes abuse. It's a form of sensory abuse that specifically targets children with conditions like Zoe's hyperacusia. I had no idea such a thing even existed. Most people don't. It's insidious because the abuse is invisible. There are no bruises, but the psychological impact can be severe. Dr. Chen glanced at Zoe, who sat curled in an oversized beanbag chair. The good news is that Zoe is incredibly resilient, and the fact that you immediately believed her and took action will significantly aid her recovery. What do we need to do now? I'd like to see Zoe twice a week for the next month. Then we can reassess. We'll work on processing the trauma, rebuilding her sense of safety, and developing additional coping strategies. Richard nodded. Whatever she needs. As they left the office, Zoe slipped her hand into Richard's. Dr. Chen is really nice. She is. Did it help talking to her? Yeah. She helped me understand that it wasn't my fault. They stopped for lunch at Zoe's favorite quiet cafe. Over grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, they talked about lighter things. Zoe told him about a book she was reading, about a science project she wanted to do. Richard marveled at her resilience. Despite everything, she could still find joy in simple things. That afternoon, Richard set up his laptop at the kitchen table while Zoe did homework nearby. He'd decided to work from home indefinitely. His assistant had been understanding when he'd explained he needed to be home for family reasons. Around 3 p.m., his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Richard Callahan. Mr. Callahan, my name is Thomas Wright. Your attorney Marcus Patterson reached out to me. I understand you recently separated from Vanessa. Richard's pulse quickened. You were married to her? 4 years ago. I was her second husband. Marcus thought we should talk. Over the next 30 minutes, Richard listened to a story that chillingly mirrored his own. Thomas Wright had been a 40-year-old venture capitalist, widowed, with a 6-year-old son named Jake when he'd met Vanessa at a charity gala. The problem started about 6 months in, Thomas explained. My son Jake has autism, high functioning, but he has specific routines and needs. Vanessa seemed understanding at first, but then she started deliberately disrupting his routines. My God, Richard breathed. I didn't catch on for almost a year. Jake would try to tell me things weren't right, but he struggles with communication, and Vanessa was very careful. The final straw came when I installed a nanny cam. What did you see? Her deliberately triggering his meltdowns, then filming them on her phone. I later discovered she'd been building a case to have Jake declared mentally unfit, planning to have him institutionalized so he wouldn't be an obstacle to our marriage. Richard felt physically ill. What did you do? Divorced her immediately, got a restraining order. I offered her a settlement to go away quietly, which she took. My lawyer advised it was better than a drawn-out court battle that might traumatize Jake further. How's your son now? Thriving. It's been 4 years, and he's doing wonderfully. We're both in therapy, we have good support systems, and honestly, discovering the truth when we did probably saved us from much worse damage long-term. After the call ended, Richard sat staring at his laptop. Zoe looked up from her math worksheet. Daddy, are you okay? Richard refocused on his daughter. I am. I was just thinking about how lucky we are. Lucky? Lucky that I came home early yesterday. Lucky that we found out the truth. Lucky that we have each other. Zoe considered this. Like Dr. Chen said, sometimes bad things happen, but we can still find the good parts. Exactly like that. That evening, after Zoe was in bed, Richard sat in his home office and made a decision. He opened his laptop and began typing an email to Marcus. Marcus, after speaking with Thomas Wright, I've decided I want documentation of what she did. I want it on record so that if she tries this with another family, there's a trail. Can we explore options? Marcus's response came within minutes. I understand the impulse, but we need to be strategic. Any legal action could mean Zoe testifying, being questioned, reliving trauma. Are you sure that's worth it? Richard stared at the message. He wanted justice. He wanted Vanessa to face consequences. But at what cost to Zoe? He walked back to Zoe's room, standing in the doorway watching her sleep. She looked peaceful, breathing even and slow. After everything she'd been through, she deserved peace. Richard returned to his office and typed a new message. "You're right. Let's offer a settlement with the condition that she signs away any claims to contact with Zoe and agrees to a restraining order. I want her gone from our lives completely. Zoe's well-being comes first." The next few days fell into a new rhythm. Richard worked from home, conducting video meetings during Zoe's school hours and being present when she returned each afternoon. They cooked together, did homework together, watched nature documentaries. Zoe had a session with Dr. Chen on Thursday, and afterward, Dr. Chen asked to speak with Richard alone. "She's doing remarkably well," Dr. Chen reported. "Children are incredibly resilient when they feel safe and supported. That's good to hear. There's something else. Zoe mentioned she's been teaching herself advanced mathematics. She showed me some of the work. Richard, she's working at a level far beyond her grade. She's always been bright, like her mother. This is beyond bright. This is exceptional. I think you should consider having her assessed for gifted programs." Richard considered this. Would it be too much stress right now? Actually, I think the opposite. Giving her mind complex problems to solve might be exactly the healthy outlet she needs. I'll look into it. On Friday evening, Marcus called with news. Vanessa's attorney has accepted our terms. Full divorce, she gets a settlement of $500,000. No contest to the restraining order. Complete termination of any claims regarding Zoe. She'll sign Monday. That's it? She didn't fight? She knows we could make things difficult. She's smart enough to take the money and run. Good. The sooner this is over, the better. Monday morning arrived with autumn rain pattering against windows. Richard woke early and checked on Zoe. She was still asleep, curled around her favorite stuffed elephant that had been a gift from Caroline years ago. Downstairs, Richard made coffee and reviewed documents Marcus had sent late last night. The divorce papers were comprehensive. Vanessa would receive her settlement, sign away all rights regarding Zoe, and agree to a restraining order. At 8 a.m., his phone rang. Marcus. "Morning, Richard. Vanessa's attorney just called. She'll be at my office at 10 to sign everything. You don't need to be there. Actually, it's better if you're not. I'll handle it and send you the filed documents by end of day. That fast? She wants this done. My guess is she's already lined up her next target." After hanging up, Richard sat at the kitchen table staring at his coffee. He felt foolish. How had he not seen through her? "Daddy?" Richard looked up to find Zoe in the doorway, wearing favorite purple pajamas, blonde hair, sleep mussed. "Morning, sweetheart. How did you sleep?" "Good. No bad dreams." She padded over and climbed into his lap. "You look sad." "I'm not sad. I'm just thinking." "About Vanessa?" "A little bit." Zoe was quiet for a moment. "Dr. Chen says it's okay to feel sad even when we do the right thing. She says feelings are complicated." Richard hugged her close. "Dr. Chen is very smart." They had breakfast together, scrambled eggs and toast, and then Richard helped Zoe get ready for school. The school car arrived at 8:15. "I'll pick you up today myself," he told her. "We can go get ice cream after if you want." "Really? You're picking me up?" Zoe's face lit up. "Really? I'm going to be picking you up a lot more often from now on." Zoe threw her arms around his waist. "Best Monday ever." As the car pulled away, Zoe waved from the window. Richard waved back, heart swelling. Back inside, Richard settled into his home office and began permanently restructuring his work life. He opened his laptop and started drafting an email to the board of directors. Effective immediately, I will be transitioning to a part-time executive role. I will maintain my position as CEO, but will be delegating day-to-day operations to our COO, Jennifer Santos. Before he could second-guess himself, he hit send. Within minutes, his phone rang. Jennifer Santos, his chief operating officer. "Richard, I just got your email. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, Jen. Actually, everything's better than it's been in a long time. I need to be home more for Zoe." I appreciate the confidence. Does this have anything to do with Vanessa? Vanessa and I are divorcing. And yes, part of this decision comes from realizing I've had my priorities wrong. I'm sorry about the divorce, Richard, but I'm glad you're putting Zoe first. After hanging up, Richard felt a weight lift. For years, he'd built his identity around being the founder and driving force of Callahan Technologies. But that identity had cost him time with Caroline before she died, cost him awareness of what was happening to Zoe. At 10 a.m., Richard received a text from Marcus. "She's here, signing now." Richard sat at his desk, imagining Vanessa in Marcus's downtown office signing away her claim to his life. 20 minutes later, "Done, you're free." "Congratulations." Free? Richard just felt tired. He'd spent 18 months married to someone he never really knew. His computer dinged with an email from the board chairman. "Richard, got your message. We support your decision and have full confidence in Jennifer. Your family comes first." More emails followed from board members and senior staff, all supportive. Richard felt grateful for the team he'd built. At noon, he drove to his attorney's office to pick up the filed divorce papers. Marcus met him in the conference room, looking satisfied. "Clean break," Marcus said, sliding documents across the table. "She gets her settlement, you get your daughter and your peace. The restraining order is active as of this morning." "Did she say anything?" "She was cold, businesslike, signed everything without comment, collected her settlement check, and left." That afternoon, Richard picked up Zoe from school personally, as promised. Her face lit up when she saw him waiting. "You really came," she exclaimed, running to hug him. "I promised, didn't I? Ready for ice cream?" "Yes." They went to a small ice cream parlor that Zoe loved because it was quiet and never crowded. Zoe ordered chocolate chip in a cup, Richard got vanilla. They sat by the window, watching people pass. "Daddy, I have something to tell you," Zoe said between bites. "I got moved up in math class." "Really? That's wonderful. Mrs. Peterson says I'm ready for 4th grade math. She wants to know if it's okay if I work with the older kids during math time." Richard felt pride swell. "Of course it's okay. I'm so proud of you, Zoe. She also said maybe I could be in the math competition team. I think you could do anything you set your mind to." Zoe grinned, chocolate smudged on her chin. Richard reached over to wipe it away gently. On the drive home, Zoe was quiet, looking out the window with her noise-canceling headphones on. Richard glanced at her in the rearview mirror and felt overwhelming love. That evening, as he helped Zoe with homework, his phone rang with an unknown number. "Mr. Callahan? This is Detective Sarah Morrison with Portland Police. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Richard's pulse quickened. "Of course. Zoe, can you keep working? I need to take this call." He stepped into the hallway. "Detective, what's this about? I understand you recently separated from Vanessa Montgomery, or Vanessa Chen as we have her in our system." "That's correct. The divorce was finalized today. Mr. Callahan, we've been investigating Ms. Chen in connection with several fraud cases. Your attorney contacted us with information that we found relevant." Richard's mind raced. "What kind of fraud?" "Without going into too much detail, we're looking at a pattern involving targeting wealthy individuals, particularly widowers with children. We believe she may have been involved in more than just gold digging, identity theft, financial manipulation, and child endangerment. The child endangerment doesn't surprise me. She was abusing my daughter." So Mr. Patterson indicated. "Would you and your daughter be willing to provide statements?" Richard thought of Zoe in the other room, happily working on spelling words, finally feeling safe. "Detective, my daughter has been through enough. I don't want to put her through depositions." "I understand. However, your testimony alone could be valuable." "And Mr. Callahan? If we can build a strong enough case, Ms. Chen won't be in a position to target any other families." Richard closed his eyes. This wasn't just about him and Zoe anymore. "Let me think about it. Can I call you back in a few days?" "Of course. Here's my direct line." After hanging up, Richard stood in the hallway, conflicted. He wanted Vanessa to face consequences, but he also wanted Zoe's life to move forward. He returned to the kitchen where Zoe was finishing homework. She looked up with a smile. "All done. Want to check my spelling?" Richard sat beside her and reviewed her work. Perfect, as usual. Excellent job, sweetheart. Daddy, you look worried. Was that call bad news? Not bad news exactly. Just complicated grown-up stuff. Zoe tilted her head, studying him. Is it about Vanessa? Sometimes Richard forgot how perceptive his daughter was. Kind of. Some police officers want to talk to me about her. Because of what she did to me? Partly, and because they think she might have hurt other people too. Zoe absorbed this. Are you going to talk to them? I'm thinking about it, but whatever I decide, I'll make sure you're safe and protected. What if talking to them helps other kids like me who have mean stepmoms? Richard pulled Zoe into a hug. When did you become so wise? Dr. Chen says wisdom is different from being smart. That night, after tucking Zoe into bed, Richard called Marcus. The police contacted me, Richard said. You gave them our information? I did. I hope you're not angry. When I heard they were investigating her for fraud, I thought our documentation could help. I'm not angry. I'm conflicted. Zoe's doing so well, and I don't want to disrupt her recovery. Richard, they said they don't need Zoe to testify. Your statement, combined with others, could be enough. Let me talk to Dr. Chen first. The next morning, Richard had a phone session with Dr. Chen while Zoe was at school. The detective wants me to provide a statement, Richard explained, but I'm worried about how this might affect Zoe. Dr. Chen was quiet. Here's what I think, Richard. Children who've experienced abuse often struggle with feelings of powerlessness. When they see justice being pursued, when they see adults taking their pain seriously, it can actually be empowering. So you think I should do it? I think you should talk to Zoe about it. Let her have a voice in the decision. That gives her back some of the control that Vanessa took. That afternoon, Richard sat Zoe down. Remember how I told you the police wanted to talk to me about Vanessa? Zoe nodded. If I talk to them and tell them what Vanessa did to you, it might help them stop her from hurting other kids. But I won't do it if it makes you uncomfortable. Zoe was quiet, small face serious. Would I have to talk to them? No, just me. Would Vanessa know I told you what she did? She already knows. That's why she's not allowed near us. Zoe thought for a long moment. I think you should tell them. Because what if there's another girl like me, and Vanessa is mean to her too? What if that girl's daddy doesn't come home early to see it? Richard felt his throat tighten. You're absolutely sure? I'm sure. It's the right thing to do. 2 days later, Richard sat in Detective Morrison's office, providing a detailed statement. He brought medical records, Dr. Chen's notes, and Marcus's documentation. Detective Morrison listened intently. Mr. Callahan, this is extremely helpful. Combined with what we're hearing from her previous victims, we're building a strong case. What happens now? We continue investigating. If we have enough evidence, we'll present the case to the district attorney. Richard left feeling lighter. He'd taken action. He'd used his experience to potentially protect others. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a new normal. Richard worked reduced hours, focusing on being present for Zoe. They established routines, breakfast together every morning, Richard picking her up from school most days, dinner at the table, bedtime stories. Zoe thrived. Her sessions with Dr. Chen continued, and she showed remarkable progress. Nightmares became less frequent, then stopped. Her anxiety diminished. She began to laugh more freely, to sing around the house. The assessment from the Davidson Institute confirmed what Dr. Chen suspected. Zoe tested in the 99th percentile for mathematical reasoning. They recommended enrichment programs. Richard enrolled her in Saturday morning classes for gifted students at Portland State University. Zoe loved them, coming home each week bubbling with excitement. One Saturday afternoon in late October, Richard and Zoe were working in the garden, Caroline's garden that Richard had maintained. They were planting tulip bulbs for spring. Daddy, Zoe said as she carefully placed a bulb in the ground, I've been thinking about Vanessa. Richard's hand stilled. What about her? I'm not mad at her anymore. Dr. Chen says being mad takes a lot of energy, and I'd rather use my energy for fun things. That's very mature of you, sweetheart. But I'm still glad she's gone. Me too. Zoe patted dirt over the bulb. When these grow in spring, will you help me bring some to Mom's grave? Of course. Good. I think Mom would like that we're gardening together. Richard looked at his daughter, this wise little soul, and felt overwhelming gratitude. That evening, Marcus called with an update. The district attorney is moving forward with charges against Vanessa: fraud, identity theft, and 3 counts of child endangerment. How long could she go to prison? If convicted on all counts, up to 10 years. But she'll likely take a plea deal. After hanging up, Richard felt closure. Justice was being pursued. Vanessa would face consequences. He found Zoe in her room, reading a book about marine biology. She looked up when he entered. Good news? She asked, reading his expression. Very good news. The police are moving forward with their case. Does that mean she'll go to jail? Probably yes. Zoe nodded slowly. That's good. Not because I want her to be sad, but because it means other kids will be safe. Richard sat on the edge of her bed. When did you become so compassionate? Dr. Chen says compassion means understanding that people can do bad things and still deserve to be treated fairly. That night, as Richard kissed Zoe goodnight, she wrapped her arms around his neck. I love you, Daddy. Thank you for protecting me. I love you too, sweetheart. And I'll always protect you. Always. As Richard turned out the light and pulled the door partly closed, he heard Zoe whisper, Good night, Mom. We're okay now. Standing in the hallway, Richard felt tears prick his eyes. They were okay now. It had been a long, painful journey, but they'd come through it together. The sound of silence in their home was no longer empty or frightening. It was peaceful, full of possibility, and above all, safe. 3 months had passed since Vanessa left. Winter had settled over Portland, bringing crisp mornings and early sunsets that painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Richard stood at the kitchen window watching Zoe build a snowman in the backyard, her laughter carrying through the double-paned glass designed to muffle sound for her sensitive ears. She wore the purple winter coat Caroline had bought her last year, still a bit too big, but Zoe refused to replace it. Her blonde hair peeked from beneath a knitted hat, and her cheeks were flushed pink from the cold. She looked happy. Genuinely, purely happy. Richard's phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Detective Morrison. Can you come to the station tomorrow, have news about the case? He typed back, 2 p.m. work? Perfect. See you then. The investigation into Vanessa had been thorough and slow. Richard had provided his statement weeks ago, and since then, he'd heard little beyond occasional updates from Marcus. The district attorney was building a comprehensive case, and apparently, Richard and Zoe weren't Vanessa's only victims. 2 other families had come forward with similar stories. Wealthy widowers with special needs, children, systematic abuse, calculated manipulation. Daddy, Zoe's voice called from outside. Come help me with the snowman's head. It's too heavy. Richard pulled on his coat and boots, stepping into the crisp winter air. The cold bit at his face, but it felt clean, refreshing. He helped Zoe hoist the large snowball onto the snowman's body, and together they added stick arms and stone eyes. He needs a name, Zoe declared, stepping back to admire their work. What do you think we should call him? Zoe tilted her head thoughtfully. Frosty feels too obvious. How about Walter? Richard laughed. Walter the Snowman. I like it. They worked together in comfortable silence, adding a carrot nose and arranging rocks into a smile. Richard marveled at how far they'd come. 3 months ago, Zoe had been anxious, withdrawn, jumping at sudden sounds. Now she was out here in the cold, playing, creating, living like a normal 7-year-old. Well, not exactly normal. Zoe was anything but ordinary. Her enrollment in the gifted program at Portland State had revealed capabilities that astonished even her instructors. Last week, Professor Martinez had called Richard personally to discuss Zoe's progress. Mr. Callahan, I've been teaching mathematics for 23 years, and I've never encountered a child quite like Zoe. She's not just memorizing formulas, she's understanding underlying principles that most students don't grasp until college. Last Saturday, she proposed an elegant solution to a problem that stumped my graduate students. Is that unusual for the program? Richard had asked. Unusual doesn't begin to cover it. Zoe is exceptional even among the exceptional. With your permission, I'd like to introduce her to some colleagues who specialize in nurturing profoundly gifted children. Richard had agreed, of course. Anything that gave Zoe's brilliant mind the stimulation it craved. "Daddy, you're thinking too hard again," Zoe said, pulling Richard back to the present. She stood with her hands on her hips, mock stern. "Dr. Chen says we should practice being present in the moment. You're absolutely right." Richard grinned and scooped up a handful of snow. "And in this moment, I'm thinking about starting a snowball fight." Zoe's eyes widened. "Daddy, no! That's not fair. You're way bigger than—" Her protest dissolved into giggles as Richard's gentle snowball landed on her shoulder. She immediately retaliated, and for the next 15 minutes they chased each other around the yard, laughing and throwing snow with abandon. When they finally trudged back inside, cheeks burning and fingers tingling, Richard made hot chocolate while Zoe changed into dry clothes. They settled on the couch together, mugs warming their hands, watching the snow continue to fall outside. "This is my favorite kind of day," Zoe said softly, leaning against Richard's side. "Mine too, sweetheart. Do you think Mom can see us, like, from heaven or wherever she is?" The question caught Richard off guard. They talked about Caroline often, but Zoe rarely asked about the metaphysical aspects of death. "I'd like to think so." "What made you think of that?" "Because I was happy today. Really happy. And I felt like Mom was happy too, watching us play in the snow." Zoe looked up at Richard with those serious gray eyes. "Do you think she's proud of us? For getting through the hard stuff with Vanessa?" Richard's throat tightened. "I think your mom is incredibly proud of you, Zoe. For being brave, for being strong, for being exactly who you are. What about you? Is she proud of you?" "I hope so. I think she'd be glad that I finally figured out what really matters." Zoe nodded, satisfied, and returned her attention to her hot chocolate. Richard held his daughter close, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing, the warmth of her small body against his. These moments, quiet, simple, perfect, were what he'd been missing for so long. The next afternoon, Richard sat across from Detective Morrison in a small conference room at the Portland Police Department. The detective was a woman in her mid-40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that Richard appreciated. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Callahan," she began, sliding a folder across the table. "I wanted to update you personally on the case against Vanessa Chen." Richard opened the folder. Inside were photographs, documents, and what appeared to be a timeline of Vanessa's activities over the past 8 years. "We've identified 5 victims total," Detective Morrison continued. "You're the most recent. Before you, there was Thomas Wright, whose son has autism. Before him, a man named Robert Harrison, whose daughter has cerebral palsy. The pattern is consistent. She targets wealthy widowers with special needs children, marries them quickly, and either abuses the children directly or creates situations designed to make the children appear too difficult to manage." "What's the end game?" Richard asked, though he suspected he knew. "Money, primarily. In some cases, she pushed for the children to be placed in residential facilities, which would have given her unfettered access to her husband's wealth and attention. In other cases, like yours, she seems to have simply enjoyed the cruelty. Our psychologist consultant believes she has antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features." Richard stared at the photographs of Vanessa. Glamorous shots from charity galas, wedding photos with different men, always smiling, always beautiful, always hiding the monster beneath. "The district attorney is offering her a plea deal," Detective Morrison said. 7 years in prison, mandatory psychological treatment, and lifetime registration as a child abuser. If she doesn't take it, we go to trial, and she's looking at potentially 15 years. Do you think she'll take it? Her attorney is advising her to. The evidence is overwhelming. Your testimony, combined with the others, medical records, the nanny cam footage Thomas Wright provided. She doesn't have a defense. When will we know? She has until the end of the week to decide. I'll keep you informed. Detective Morrison leaned forward. Mr. Callahan, I want you to know what you did coming forward providing such detailed documentation. You've likely saved other children from experiencing what Zoe went through. That takes courage. Richard shook his head. Zoe is the one with courage. I just finally opened my eyes. Don't sell yourself short. Many parents in your situation choose denial because the truth is too painful. You chose to protect your daughter, and that matters. As Richard drove home, he thought about Vanessa sitting in some attorney's office, deciding whether to accept 7 years in prison. He felt nothing, no anger, no satisfaction, no vindictiveness. Just a profound relief that she would never be in a position to hurt another child again. When he arrived home, Zoe was at the kitchen table working on a mathematics problem set that Professor Martinez had given her. She looked up with a smile. "How was your meeting?" Richard had been honest with Zoe about the investigation, explaining things in age-appropriate terms. She deserved to know that her pain had been taken seriously, that justice was being pursued. "Good news," Richard said, hanging up his coat. "The police think Vanessa is going to accept a deal to go to prison for 7 years. Zoe set down her pencil. 7 years is a long time. It is. Will I be 14 when she gets out? The calculation was instant and accurate, so typical of Zoe's mathematical mind. Yes, you'll be 14. I'll be in high school. That's weird to think about. Zoe was quiet for a moment. Daddy, I don't want to see her when she gets out, even when I'm older. You don't have to. The restraining order is permanent. She can never contact you. Good. Zoe returned to her math problem. I'm glad she's going to jail, but I don't want to think about her anymore. Is that okay? That's perfectly okay, sweetheart. You get to move forward with your life. And she was moving forward remarkably well. Dr. Chen had gradually reduced their sessions from twice weekly to once a week, then to every other week. Zoe's anxiety had diminished to nearly normal levels for a child her age. She'd made friends in her gifted program, other brilliant, quirky kids who understood being different. The nightmares had stopped entirely. Zoe slept peacefully through the nights, and her appetite had returned. She'd even started asking about getting a pet, which Richard was seriously considering. A cat, maybe, or a small dog. Something quiet and gentle that wouldn't trigger her auditory sensitivity. That weekend, Zoe had her Saturday class at Portland State. Richard dropped her off and decided to use the 2 hours to run errands. He was standing in line at the bank when he heard a familiar voice behind him. Richard Callahan? He turned to find Jennifer Santos, his COO, standing with a man Richard didn't recognize. Jennifer looked surprised but pleased. Jennifer, hi. I didn't expect to see you here. We just opened a new account for the R&D department. She gestured to the man beside her. This is my husband, Marco. Marco, this is Richard Callahan, the CEO I've told you about. They shook hands, exchanged pleasantries. Marco was warm and friendly, asking about Zoe, mentioning that Jennifer had spoken highly of Richard's recent decision to prioritize family. It's refreshing, honestly, Marco said. Too many people in your position would have just hired more help rather than being present themselves. After they parted ways, Richard found himself thinking about the encounter. A year ago, he would have been embarrassed to be seen doing mundane weekend banking errands. He would have worried it made him look less dedicated to the company. Now he realized how twisted that thinking had been. When he picked up Zoe from her class, she was practically vibrating with excitement. Daddy, Professor Martinez introduced me to Dr. Keiko Tanaka. She's a mathematician at MIT and she studies number theory, and she said my approach to the Goldbach conjecture problem was really creative. Richard helped Zoe into the car, smiling at her enthusiasm. That's wonderful, sweetheart. What's the Goldbach conjecture? It's this really old unsolved problem about whether every even number greater than 2 can be expressed as the sum of 2 prime numbers. It's been unsolved since 1742. Dr. Tanaka says that even though we can't solve it yet, exploring it helps us understand number theory better. As Zoe chattered about prime numbers and mathematical proofs, Richard felt a surge of pride. This brilliant, curious, resilient child was his daughter. Despite everything she'd been through, she was thriving. That evening, Richard received a call from Marcus. Richard, just got word from the DA's office. Vanessa accepted the plea deal. 7 years. No parole eligibility until she's served at least 5. It's done. Richard closed his eyes, letting the news wash over him. Thank you, Marcus, for everything. You're welcome, and Richard? I've handled a lot of divorce cases, but I've never seen a father fight so hard to protect his child. Zoe is lucky to have you. After hanging up, Richard found Zoe in her room, building an elaborate structure with her engineering blocks. Another outlet for her mathematical mind. Zoe, I have some news. Vanessa accepted the deal. She's going to prison. Zoe's hand stilled on the blocks. For how long? 7 years, but she has to serve at least 5 before she can even ask to get out early. Zoe nodded slowly, processing. Is it weird that I don't feel happy about it? I mean, I'm glad she can't hurt anyone else, but I don't feel happy that she's going to prison. Richard sat on the floor beside his daughter. That's not weird at all. It means you have compassion even for people who hurt you. That's a sign of emotional maturity. Dr. Chen says compassion doesn't mean letting people hurt us. It just means we can understand that they're human even when they do bad things. Dr. Chen is very wise. Zoe returned to her blocks, carefully adding a bridge to her structure. Daddy, do you think Vanessa will ever feel sorry for what she did? It was a profound question, one Richard had pondered himself. I don't know, sweetheart. Some people change and some don't. But whether she feels sorry or not doesn't change what happened, and it doesn't change that we're moving forward. I like moving forward, Zoe said quietly. I like our life now. Just us. Me too. That night, as Richard tucked Zoe into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. Daddy, I've been thinking about something. What's that? When I grow up, I want to help kids like me. Kids who have special needs and might not have people to protect them. Richard's heart swelled. That's a beautiful goal, Zoe. How do you think you'd want to help them? I don't know yet. Maybe I could be a doctor who specializes in ear problems. Or maybe a lawyer who fights for kids' rights. Or maybe I could invent technology that helps people with hyperacusia. I have time to figure it out. You have all the time in the world, and whatever you decide to do, I know you'll be amazing at it. Zoe smiled and closed her eyes. Good night, Daddy. Love you. Love you too, sweetheart. Sweet dreams. As Richard left Zoe's room, he paused in the hallway looking at the framed photographs on the wall. There was Caroline smiling in the garden, Caroline and Zoe at the beach, Caroline and Richard on their wedding day. He whispered to the photographs, We're okay, Caroline. We're really okay now. And for the first time since her death, Richard truly believed it. Spring arrived in Portland with explosive color. The tulip bulbs Zoe and Richard had planted months ago burst through the soil in vibrant purples, reds, and yellows. The cherry blossoms along their street created canopies of pink that drifted down like snow whenever the wind blew. Zoe was now 8 years old. Her birthday in March had been a small celebration. Just Richard, Zoe, and 3 of her friends from the gifted program. They'd gone to the Science Museum where Zoe had gleefully explained exhibits to anyone who would listen. Richard had never seen her so animated, so comfortable in her own skin. It was now mid-April, and Richard sat in a conference room at Portland State University, surrounded by educators and specialists. Professor Martinez had called this meeting to discuss Zoe's unique situation, which made Richard slightly nervous. Mr. Callahan, Professor Martinez began, thank you for coming. I want to start by showing you something. He pulled up a document on the projector, a mathematics paper titled Novel Approaches to Prime Number Distribution in Elementary Cases. The author's name made Richard's eyebrows rise. Zoe Callahan. This is a paper Zoe wrote last month, Professor Martinez explained. She was frustrated with how traditional methods explained prime number distribution, so she developed her own approach. Now, it's not groundbreaking research, she's 8 after all, but the logical thinking, the mathematical maturity, the clarity of expression. Mr. Callahan, this is college-level work, Dr. Tanaka, who'd been consulting remotely from MIT, appeared on a video screen. Richard, may I call you Richard? I've been working with Zoe online for the past 2 months, and I need to be frank with you. Your daughter is profoundly gifted. We're not talking about a bright child or even a typically gifted child. We're talking about someone who processes mathematical concepts at a level I rarely see even in graduate students. Richard felt pride and concern warring in his chest. "What are you suggesting?" "We're suggesting," said Dr. Helen Park, the director of gifted education at Portland State, that Zoe's current educational placement, while good, isn't challenging her enough. She needs more advanced coursework, more engagement with complex problems, more interaction with intellectual peers. "She's 8 years old," Richard said carefully. "She still plays with dolls and builds snowmen. I don't want her to lose her childhood." "We're not suggesting she lose anything," Professor Martinez assured him. "What we're proposing is a hybrid model. Zoe continues at her current school for subjects like art, physical education, social studies, areas where age-appropriate socialization is important. But for mathematics and science, she takes university-level courses here, tailored to her pace." Dr. Tanaka leaned forward on the screen. "Richard, I understand your hesitation. But consider this. Zoe's mind needs stimulation the way her body needs food. Right now, she's intellectually hungry, and we have the resources to feed that hunger while still preserving her childhood in every other respect." Richard thought about Zoe's excitement after each Saturday class, how she'd come home bursting with ideas and questions. He thought about how she'd started teaching herself physics from online resources because mathematics alone wasn't enough to satisfy her curiosity. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Talk to Zoe about it?" "Of course," Dr. Park said. "This is a big decision. Take your time." That evening, Richard sat with Zoe in the living room. She was working on a puzzle, a 1,000-piece monstrosity depicting the Mandelbrot set that she'd requested for her birthday. "Zoe, I need to talk to you about something important." She looked up, reading his serious expression. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine. But Professor Martinez and some other people at the university want to talk to you about taking some college classes. Real college classes, not just Saturday enrichment." Zoe's eyes widened. "Really? What kind of classes?" "Mathematics, primarily. Maybe physics. You'd still go to your regular school for other subjects, but for math and science, you'd learn at the university." "Would I be with other kids my age?" "Probably not. You'd be in classes with college students." Zoe set down the puzzle piece she was holding. "That sounds kind of scary." "It does, doesn't it? That's why I want you to really think about it. You don't have to do this just because people think you can. You're allowed to just be 8 years old." Zoe was quiet for a long moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Finally, she said, "Can I try it? Like, try one class and see if I like it?" "Of course. We can start with one class and see how it goes. And if I don't like it, I can stop." "Absolutely. This is about giving you opportunities, not pressure." Zoe nodded, satisfied. "Okay, I want to try." 2 weeks later, Zoe attended her first undergraduate course, Introduction to Abstract Algebra. Richard sat in the back of the lecture hall, ostensibly reading a book but actually watching his daughter interact with students who were 10 to 15 years older than her. The lecture hall was equipped with excellent acoustics, and Zoe wore her discreet ear protection devices, small, nearly invisible pieces that filtered harsh frequencies while allowing her to hear clearly. Dr. Chen had recommended them months ago, and they'd made environments like this manageable for Zoe. At first, the college students had been openly skeptical. An 8-year-old in their algebra class? But within 20 minutes, Zoe had answered a question that stumped the rest of the class, explaining her reasoning with such clarity that even the professor looked impressed. After class, several students approached Zoe to ask about her solution. Richard watched as his shy daughter explained her thinking, gaining confidence with each question. One student, a young woman named Amy, invited Zoe to a study group. "We meet Wednesdays after class," Amy said. "If it's okay with your dad, you're totally welcome to join us. We have a quiet study room reserved in the library. The acoustics are really good there." Zoe looked back at Richard with pleading eyes. He nodded, and Zoe's face lit up with a smile. In the car on the way home, Zoe was bubbling over with excitement. "Daddy, that was amazing. Professor Chen, not Dr. Chen, a different Chen. She explained ring theory in a way I never thought about before. And then there was this problem about group homomorphisms that was really tricky, but I figured it out. And Amy said I'm welcome at the study group and..." Breathe, sweetheart, Richard laughed. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I really did. Is it weird that I liked it more than recess at school? Not weird, just Zoe. Over the next few weeks, a pattern emerged. Zoe would attend her regular school, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday for a full day. Wednesday mornings, she'd go to regular school, then Richard would pick her up at noon and take her to Portland State for her algebra class and study group. She thrived. But it wasn't all academic. Zoe still played with her friends, still built elaborate structures with her blocks, still insisted on bedtime stories every night. She was fundamentally still a child, just one with an extraordinary mind. One Wednesday in May, Richard was waiting in the university library while Zoe was at her study group, when he noticed a woman watching him. She was perhaps 40, professionally dressed with kind eyes and an uncertain smile. "Excuse me," she said, approaching. "Are you Richard Callahan?" Richard tensed slightly. "I am. I'm Dr. Patricia Williamson. I work with the Oregon Department of Human Services, Child Welfare Division." She showed him her credentials. "I wanted to speak with you about your daughter, Zoe." Richard's heart rate spiked. "Is there a problem?" "No, no problem at all, Doctor." Williamson assured him quickly. "Quite the opposite. I've been following Zoe's case since the investigation into Vanessa Chen. I wanted to personally thank you." "Thank me?" "Your willingness to come forward, to document everything thoroughly, to cooperate with the investigation. It's made a significant difference. Vanessa Chen is now registered as a child abuser. If she ever tries to work with children again, or if she enters into a relationship with someone who has children, that information will be flagged. You've created a paper trail that will protect other families." Richard felt the tension leave his shoulders. "I just did what any parent should do." "You'd be surprised how few actually do," Dr. Williamson said sadly. "Many parents, especially wealthy ones, choose to handle things privately to avoid scandal. By going through official channels, you've ensured that Vanessa can't simply move to another city and start over with a clean slate." After Dr. Williamson left, Richard sat in the library thinking about her words. He'd never considered himself particularly brave or admirable. He'd simply been protecting his daughter. But maybe sometimes doing the right thing was enough. When Zoe's study group ended, she bounded over to Richard with Amy and 2 other students in tow. "Daddy, this is Amy, Marcus, and Chen. That's his first name, isn't that confusing? They want to know if I can come to a mathematics symposium next month. It's on a Saturday and it's all day, and there will be presentations about cutting-edge research. Can I go? Please?" Richard looked at the eager faces of Zoe's new friends, college students who'd clearly adopted his 8-year-old daughter as their unofficial mascot and study partner. "Will there be supervision?" Richard asked Amy. "Oh, absolutely. Dr. Martinez is organizing it and parents are welcome to attend. It's actually a really cool event, mathematicians from all over the West Coast presenting their research. The main auditorium has assisted listening devices too, which might help with Zoe's ears." "Then yes, Zoe can go." Zoe squealed with delight and hugged Richard's waist. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." As they drove home, Zoe chattered about the symposium, about a particularly interesting problem they'd worked on in study group, about how Marcus was teaching her chess, and she'd almost beaten him yesterday. Richard listened, marveling at how far they'd come. A year ago, Zoe had been a frightened child, anxious and withdrawn, suffering in silence. Now she was confident, engaged, surrounded by people who appreciated her brilliant mind and gentle heart. That night, after tucking Zoe into bed, Richard stood in the hallway looking at Caroline's photograph again. "She's thriving, Caroline," he whispered. "She's happy and safe and brilliant and kind. I think we're doing okay." The photograph didn't answer, but Richard felt a warmth in his chest that he chose to interpret as Caroline's approval. He went downstairs and poured himself a small glass of wine, settling into his favorite chair by the window. The tulips they'd planted were fully bloomed now, creating a riot of color in the garden. In the morning, he and Zoe would cut some to take to Caroline's grave, as they did every few weeks. His phone buzzed with an email from Jennifer Santos. "Richard, the Q2 numbers are excellent. The team is thriving with the new structure. You made the right call stepping back. Hope you and Zoe are well." He smiled and typed back, "Thanks, Jen. We're better than well. We're happy." And it was true. Richard was happy in a way he hadn't been since before Caroline's illness. Not because life was perfect, it wasn't, but because he'd finally learned what mattered most. The business was successful. The house was paid off. The investments were sound. But none of that compared to the sound of Zoe's laughter, to her excited explanations of mathematical concepts he barely understood, to the feeling of her small hand in his as they walked through the garden. Richard finished his wine and headed upstairs to sleep. Tomorrow was Thursday, which meant pancakes for breakfast, Zoe's favorite. He'd make them in the shape of numbers, as he'd started doing, and Zoe would arrange them to create equations before eating them. It was a small tradition, silly and sweet, and exactly the kind of thing that made life worth living. 2 years had passed since that Wednesday afternoon when Richard came home early and discovered the truth about Vanessa. Zoe was now 9 years old, attending 5th grade at her regular school for socialization and non-academic subjects, while taking advanced undergraduate courses at Portland State University. It was late May, the end of the academic year, and Richard sat in the audience at Portland State's Student Showcase. Zoe was one of the presenters, the youngest by far, and Richard's heart swelled with pride as she took the stage. She looked so small behind the podium, her specialized hearing aids barely visible in her ears, the newest technology that allowed her to filter out painful frequencies while still hearing clearly. Her voice was clear and confident as she began her presentation. "Good afternoon. My name is Zoe Callahan, and today I'm going to talk about the applications of group theory in analyzing sound wave patterns and how this mathematics can help people like me who have hyperacusia." The audience leaned forward, captivated. Zoe had spent months working on this project with Dr. Tanaka as her remote mentor. She'd combined her understanding of advanced mathematics with her personal experience of auditory hypersensitivity to explore whether mathematical models could predict which sound frequencies would be most problematic for people with her condition. "My hypothesis," Zoe continued, "was that by mapping the group structures inherent in sound wave frequencies, we could create a predictive model for problematic sounds. This would allow people with hyperacusia to have advance warning about environments that might cause pain and help engineers design better assistive listening devices like the ones I'm wearing today." For the next 15 minutes, Zoe walked the audience through her methodology, her results, and her conclusions. She used charts, graphs, and equations that most of the audience likely didn't fully understand, but her passion was infectious. When she finished, the auditorium erupted in applause. Professor Martinez approached the microphone. "Thank you, Zoe. That was exceptional. Does anyone have questions?" Several hands shot up. Zoe fielded questions from graduate students and faculty with the same confidence she'd shown during her presentation. When one professor asked a particularly complex question about her mathematical approach, Zoe thought for a moment, then drew a diagram on the whiteboard that clarified her reasoning. After the presentation, people crowded around Zoe to congratulate her. Richard hung back, watching his daughter interact with academics and students, holding her own in conversations about advanced mathematics and acoustic theory. "She's remarkable," a voice said beside Richard. He turned to find an older woman with silver hair and intelligent eyes. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Foster, Dean of the College of Science and Engineering. You must be very proud." "I am," Richard said, "though I can't take much credit. Zoe's brilliance is all her own. Brilliance, yes, but also curiosity, kindness, and resilience. Those qualities are nurtured, not innate." Dr. Foster smiled. "I wanted to talk to you about Zoe's future. Have you thought about her long-term educational path?" "I try not to plan too far ahead. She's only 9. "Of course. But Zoe is going to need opportunities that traditional schooling can't provide. We've been discussing within the department the possibility of creating a specialized program for profoundly gifted students, something that would allow them to progress at their own pace while still maintaining age-appropriate social development. Like what Zoe's doing now? More structured. A formal dual enrollment program where exceptional students could earn their high school diploma while simultaneously working on university coursework. Zoe would be one of the first students we'd invite to participate. Richard considered this. Can I think about it? Discuss it with Zoe and her therapist? Absolutely, there's no rush. I just wanted you to know that we're invested in Zoe's success and we're willing to create opportunities specifically tailored to her needs. As the crowd around Zoe thinned, Richard approached his daughter. She looked tired but exhilarated, her eyes bright with excitement. You were amazing, sweetheart, Richard said, hugging her. Really? You think so? I was so nervous at the beginning, but then once I started talking about the mathematics, I forgot to be scared. That's called being in your element. They drove home through the late afternoon sunshine, Zoe chattering about the questions people had asked, about feedback she'd received, about ideas for extending her research. Doctor, Tanaka wants to include my work in a paper she's writing, Zoe said, practically bouncing in her seat despite her ear protection headphones. She says I'll be listed as a co-author. Isn't that incredible? It's very incredible. How do you feel about it? Excited, and also kind of scared? Like, what if people read it and think I'm not good enough? Zoe, Dr. Tanaka wouldn't include your work if it wasn't good enough. She's one of the most respected mathematicians in the country. I know, Dr. Chen, my doctor. Chen? Not Professor Chen. She says I sometimes struggle to recognize my own competence because I'm always comparing myself to people who've been studying math for decades. Richard smiled. Dr. Chen had been working with Zoe on more than just trauma recovery. As Zoe's intellectual gifts became more apparent, they'd also addressed imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and the unique challenges of being profoundly gifted. Dr. Chen is right, Richard said. You're 9 years old, and you're doing work that impresses university professors. That's not just good, that's extraordinary. Zoe was quiet for a moment, then said softly, Sometimes I wonder if being this way, being different, is a gift or a curse. The question hit Richard hard. What makes you ask that? At school, during regular school, I don't really fit in. The other kids think I'm weird because I'd rather read about mathematics than play kickball. But then at the university, I'm too young to really be part of that group either. Sometimes I feel like I don't belong anywhere. Richard pulled into their driveway and turned off the car but didn't get out. Zoe, look at me. She turned those serious gray eyes to him. You are exactly who you're supposed to be, Richard said firmly. Your mind, your interests, your way of seeing the world, those aren't flaws. They're what make you you. And yes, being different can be lonely sometimes, but you're also connecting with people who appreciate you for exactly who you are. Amy and Marcus and the other students in your study group, they don't think you're weird. They think you're brilliant. I guess so. I know so. And Zoe? Your mother was different too. She saw the world in colors most people didn't notice. She heard music in everyday sounds. She was extraordinary, and sometimes that made her feel lonely. But she learned to embrace what made her special, and I know you will too. Zoe nodded slowly, processing this. Daddy, do you ever feel lonely? Since Mom died, and especially after Vanessa? Sometimes, Richard admitted. But I have you, and that's more than enough. What if you want to date someone new someday? Would that be okay? The question surprised Richard. Would it be okay with you? I think so. As long as they're nice to you and to me. And as long as they don't try to replace Mom. No one could ever replace your mom, Zoe. But yes, maybe someday I'll be ready to date again. Not now, though. Right now, I'm happy with how things are. They got out of the car and walked into the house together. In the kitchen, Richard found a note from their housekeeper. They'd hired someone new 6 months ago, a gentle woman named Maria, who worked weekday mornings and understood Zoe's needs. Maria made lasagna for dinner. It's in the fridge, Richard read. Want me to heat some up? Yes, please, I'm starving. While the lasagna heated, Zoe set the table and told Richard about a conversation she'd had with Amy about mathematics education. Amy says that most people hate math because they were taught to memorize formulas instead of understanding concepts. She thinks if more teachers approached it the way Professor Martinez does, more kids would enjoy it. That makes sense, Richard said, serving lasagna onto plates. I was thinking, Zoe continued, maybe when I'm older I could help create better ways to teach mathematics. Like, I could develop programs or write books or something. You could do anything you set your mind to, sweetheart. They ate dinner talking about Zoe's ideas, about school, about the mathematics symposium coming up next month. It was comfortable, easy. The kind of dinner conversation that Richard had dreamed of, but never quite achieved with Vanessa. After dinner, Zoe retreated to her room to work on a mathematics problem set while Richard cleaned the kitchen. He was loading the dishwasher when his phone rang. Marcus. Richard, hope I'm not interrupting dinner. Just finished. What's up? I wanted to give you some news. Vanessa Chen was denied early parole. She'll serve the full 7 years. Richard absorbed this information. Why was she denied? According to the parole board documents, she showed no remorse for her actions and demonstrated a concerning lack of empathy during psychological evaluations. They also noted that she'd been involved in several incidents while incarcerated, manipulation of other inmates, attempts to circumvent rules. The board felt she hadn't demonstrated sufficient rehabilitation. Good, Richard said simply. There's something else. The civil suit that Thomas Wright filed against her for emotional damages to his son was successful. She owes him $300,000. Combined with your settlement and the criminal restitution, she's essentially bankrupt. Even when she gets out, she'll be starting from nothing. Richard didn't feel triumphant, but he did feel satisfied. Justice was being served. After hanging up, Richard found Zoe in her room, surrounded by papers covered in equations. Zoe, I got some news about Vanessa. She was denied early release from prison. Zoe looked up. So she'll stay there the whole 7 years? Yes. How do you feel about that? Richard smiled at the question. So mature, so thoughtful. I feel fine about it. Mostly, I just don't think about her anymore. How about you? Same. Sometimes I remember being scared of her, but it feels like a long time ago, like something that happened to a different Zoe. You've grown a lot since then. We both have, Zoe said wisely. That night, Richard tucked Zoe into bed as he had every night for the past 2 years. She was getting older, but she still wanted the routine, and Richard cherished it. Daddy, Zoe said as he adjusted her weighted blanket, another accommodation that helped her sensory sensitivities. I've been thinking about something. What's that? I'm really happy. Like genuinely happy. And I know I'm lucky to have you and to get to study what I love and to have Dr. Chen helping me and all of that. But I also feel happy because of me, because of who I am. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. You're allowed to be proud of yourself, Zoe. You should be proud of yourself. I think Mom would be proud too. I know she would be. Zoe smiled and closed her eyes. Good night, Daddy. Love you. Love you too, sweetheart. Sweet dreams. Richard stood in the doorway for a moment, watching his daughter drift toward sleep. 9 years old, and already changing the world in her own small way. Already taking her pain and transforming it into something meaningful. Downstairs, Richard poured himself a glass of wine and stepped out onto the back deck. The evening air was warm, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine from the garden. In the distance, he could hear the gentle sounds of the neighborhood settling into night. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen. Richard, wanted to let you know I'm officially discharging Zoe from regular therapy. We'll do check-ins every few months, but she's thriving. You both are. Well done. Richard read the message twice, feeling a lump form in his throat. Discharged from therapy. It was official. They'd healed. He thought about the past 2 years, about the journey from that terrible Wednesday afternoon to this peaceful evening. It had been hard, painful, full of difficult revelations and challenging moments. But they'd made it through. Richard pulled out his phone and opened the photo album. There was Zoe at her 8th birthday party, grinning with a face full of cake. Zoe at the Science Museum explaining exhibits. Zoe receiving an award at the university. Zoe presenting her research today, confident and brilliant. Zoe and Richard building a snowman, both laughing. And further back, photos of Caroline. Caroline in the garden, Caroline holding baby Zoe, Caroline and Richard on their wedding day. We did it, Caroline. Richard whispered to the night. We survived, and more than that, we thrived. Zoe is happy and brilliant and strong. She's going to do amazing things with her life. I hope wherever you are, you can see that. A warm breeze rustled the leaves. and Richard chose to believe it was Caroline's way of answering. He finished his wine and went inside, locking the door behind him. Tomorrow was Friday, the last day of Zoe's regular school before summer vacation. They had plans to visit Caroline's grave, bringing the tulips that were still blooming in the garden. Then next week, Zoe would start a summer research program at Portland State, working with Professor Martinez on a project involving applications of abstract algebra to acoustic engineering, combining her two passions of mathematics and helping people with hearing sensitivities. Richard had arranged his work schedule to have every afternoon free, planning to take Zoe to museums, parks, the coast. It would be a good summer. A happy summer. As Richard climbed the stairs to his bedroom, he paused at Zoe's door. He could hear the gentle hum of her white noise machine, could see the soft glow of her nightlight. She was safe, she was loved, and she was exactly where she was supposed to be. And so was Richard. For the first time since Caroline's death, Richard felt genuinely at peace. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, but because he'd learned what truly mattered. Not wealth or status or professional success, but love, presence, and the courage to protect what was precious. The sound of silence in their home was no longer a void to be filled. It was a space of safety, of healing, of infinite possibility. It was the sound of a father and daughter who'd survived their storm and emerged stronger. It was the sound of home. And Richard knew, with absolute certainty, that they were going to be just fine.